My name is Megan Tate, and I'm the Director of Community Grants at the Winnipeg Foundation. We're here today to talk about our major capital community grants. So those are community grants specifically for capital projects where the request to the Winnipeg Foundation is going to be $100,000 or greater. That is our new name for, we used to just call them community grants $100,000 and greater, and that's to reflect that these are really specifically for capital projects, so capital campaigns, large-scale renovations, new builds, that kind of thing. The caveat is that organizations may apply for one community grant per calendar year, so it's up to your organization to determine what your highest priority is in terms of funding from the foundation in any given year. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about major capital grants and what the criteria are for those. Our main criteria are consistent with all of our community grants programs. Only registered charities are eligible to apply for any kind of grant from the Winnipeg Foundation. Projects must primarily benefit the citizens of Winnipeg or the Winnipeg Foundation. Certainly we do support projects that are located outside of the city, but those projects must demonstrate how they will also benefit the citizens of Winnipeg. Grants are always awarded for specific purposes or projects. And finally, grants are not made for project costs related to activities that take place before our grants committee or our board makes their decision about your grant application request. And then we have complete policies and guidelines are always available on our website, but those are sort of the key ones that I went over today. Specific to major capital grants is that if you have received a major capital grant in the past, that project must be completed and reported on before you're eligible to submit a new application. So the application process for major capital grants, last year we introduced a two-stage application process. So stage one, applications are due March 30th with notification in early May. Those grants that do meet the funding priorities would be invited to submit a stage 2 application. A couple of things to note, this year March 30th falls on Good Friday, so our policy is that if a grant deadline falls on a holiday or a weekend, organizations do have until the next business day at 4:30 p.m. to submit their application. So for us that means it'll actually be the following Tuesday because we're closed for Easter Monday as well, with the caveat that we strongly encourage you to get your application in ahead of time. We purposely hosted this information session well in advance of the March 30th deadline. And it's just a way, if you do run into any issues with your application, it gives our staff lots of time to help you out. If you're contacting us in the weeks leading up to the deadline, we'll have more time to be able to offer you support as opposed to 4:29 p.m. on the deadline day. So we always encourage you to try to get your application in sooner than the deadline date. If your organization is invited to stage 2, those applications will be due June 15th. And you would receive a decision on those applications in November. And those applications are reviewed by our full board of directors. This is kind of our disclaimer section or further clarification about eligibility. So if you submitted a major capital grant stage 1 application and you weren't invited to stage 2, you still would be able to apply for a one-time community grant in September. And in fact, last year there were a few organizations that the feedback on their stage 1 application was that it was really a better fit for a one-time community grant application, so they submitted their application in the fall. However, if your organization is invited to stage 2, that will be considered your community grant application for 2018. So just to note that an invitation to stage 2 does not guarantee funding, it just indicates that our board of directors is interested in learning more about your project. And the final thing to note is that if you are successful and your organization does receive a major capital grant, a community grant from the Winnipeg Foundation, that you are eligible to submit a new community grant, whether it's one-time, multi-year, or major capital, once you've completed your major capital project and reported back to the foundation. So that's a factor to consider in terms of timing your application to the foundation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the stage 1 application. There's a copy of it in your package that you received when you came in. So I'm just going to walk you through the different sections. It's hopefully pretty straightforward. We want to know the name of your organization. We want to know specifically how much you're requesting from the Winnipeg Foundation. We have a section for you to let us know how much funding you have confirmed to date, kind of in broad categories. How much government support do you have? How much support from other foundations, private fundraising, and then any other funds that are confirmed. And then we also have a section for anticipated funding, so additional funding that you're still seeking from community. We've got a little note there that this anticipated funding should not include what you're requesting from the Winnipeg Foundation, just so we get a clearer sense of your budget. And then we just want to know totally what the expenses of your project are going to be. And so if you think about the math portion of this application, your amount requested from the Winnipeg Foundation, your funding confirmed to date, and your anticipated funding should all add up to what your total project budget is. We want to know when you're hoping to start the project. We want to know when you're hoping to complete the project. And then we've got 3 boxes here, and there is a strict word count on these. So we want you to briefly describe the project, why it's needed, and how you think that it will benefit community. So a couple of tips about the Stage 1 application. So we've handed that out to you today for information purposes, but it is actually a fillable PDF that's available on our website. Handwritten applications will not be accepted. You do need to fill it out as the PDF. Whatever you provide to us will be going directly to our board of directors, so we're not going to edit it or clean it up. So a couple of tips. Please don't make any changes to the fillable PDF form. Don't try to change the font size so that you can squeeze in more words or do other formatting, because it gets kind of mucked up on our end, and then you're not putting your best foot forward for our board of directors. Just some additional tips for that Stage 1 application. We recognize that it's very brief, and sometimes it's harder to describe your project briefly. So be as concise as you can. Avoid any jargons, and then always proofread your proposal or have someone else proofread your proposal before you submit it to us. So Stage 2 application, yep.
Is the budget spreadsheet part of Stage 1?
No, so we don't ask for the budget as part of Stage 1. That'll be part of Stage 2. Yeah, it's very high level budget information that we're asking for in Stage 1. So the Stage 2 application, if your organization is invited to submit a Stage 2 proposal, you'll be invited via email, so you'll receive an email from Donna letting you know that you have been invited to Stage 2. The link to the Stage 2 application will be found in your online IGAM account. So for those of you familiar with the foundation, you'll have an online grant account. For those that are new, you'll need to set one up to apply. And then for those of you that are familiar with the Winnipeg Foundation, the Stage 2 application process will be very similar to our online grant application that you would be familiar with. But just to help you think ahead a little bit, we've shared what the questions are for the Stage 2 application. I won't necessarily walk through all of them today, but Naneth will bring them up on the screen, and you've got them as part of your handouts. But what you would expect. We want you to describe the project. We want you to let us know how you're going to implement it. We want to know evidence of need for the project. If your project is part of a formal capital campaign, we want some information about your capital campaign committee, what your fundraising goals and your timelines are, start and end dates. There's an opportunity to attach your capital campaign materials if appropriate. We want to know how you'll measure the success of the project, and finally, how you will support the ongoing operating costs for this project. So the final thing that I wanted to talk to you a little bit today is what the foundation looks for in these major capital projects. So first up is grant history. So if an organization is brand new to the Winnipeg Foundation, this is the first time you're applying, realistically it's probably a better fit for you to come to the foundation for a one-time community grant where the amount that you're requested is a little bit less. It would be unusual for our foundation to make such a big investment in an organization that didn't have a bit of a history with us. The flip side of that is if you do have a history with the Winnipeg Foundation, we'd be looking at if your organization has recently received a major capital community grant. For other grants, we'd be looking at, have you provided us with final reports and that kind of thing. So we're always looking at an organization's grant history when we're reviewing new proposals. We're always looking, of course, for the project need. So we are looking for clear, measurable benefits to the community, as well as measurable benefits to your organization. We're looking for a lasting impact. Again, these are big grants that the foundation is making, so we want to know kind of what the long-term impact of this project is going to be. And some of the things we might be looking for is what is the sustainability plan for this project, both financial and environmental, and what's the impact going to be on the community. Project preparedness is a big one that we're looking for. This is obviously something that would come through more as part of this stage 2 proposal. So some of the things that we would look for in terms of project preparedness is, have you conducted a community consultation or a needs analysis for this project? Have you completed a feasibility study or a business plan for this project? And that business plan would include a clear outline of the activities, the human and capital resources you would need to make that happen, that kind of thing. Are all the required reports in place, such as an engineer's report? It's a capital project, so is the deed to the property or the lease agreement, have those details been finalized? And finally, is the budget well thought out and viable? And that's where the budget template will come into play as part of the stage 2 application. So we're looking certainly at the project itself, but we're also looking at the organization that's submitting the application. So some of the things that we look for are governance. Who's on your board? Do they have the skills and the experience necessary for a project of this scale? Is the board stable? So do you have some board members who have a history with the organization and that kind of thing? We also want to know that the organization's finances are stable. Again, these are very large financial commitments from the foundation, so we're looking at things like your audited financial statements and that kind of thing. We want to see that there's a fundraising plan in place for this project. That's another thing that we'd be looking for. Again, if it's a capital campaign, do you have a capital campaign committee in place who's going to be helping you with this work? Have you done an assessment of what the long-term financial impact is going to be on your organization? So, for example, if you're looking to expand your space so that you can deliver more programming, what's that look like for your organization's long-term financial health? And finally, do you have knowledgeable staff who have the ability to manage the project effectively, both in the short term and in the long term? So those are all things that we'd be looking at for the organizations that are putting forward these applications. We also look at funding. So we're looking for confirmed revenues. Do you have key funders in place? So if you do receive operating funds from different funders, are they supportive of this initiative? Are they also willing to contribute to the capital components of this project? We're also looking for what percentage you're requesting from the Winnipeg Foundation. It would be very rare that the foundation would fully fund a major capital project. We'd almost always be looking for you to have other funding partners in whatever initiative that is. Other considerations for the foundation is, are we first in, or are we closing the gap to help you reach that last piece to make your fundraising goal complete? Both can be strategic for the foundation, whether we're first in or we're helping you close that gap. To be candid, as you know, the funding environment these days is a bit challenging, and so our goal is, as much as possible, to have our grant dollars at work in community. So if you were looking for the foundation to be first in, I think you'd want to have a really strong reason why it would be strategic for the Winnipeg Foundation to be that first in funder, as opposed to being that funder that helps you cross the finish line and meet your fundraising goal. We also look for letters of support for projects. That's true for all of our grant applications. So, you know, letters of support from people who are knowledgeable about the sector, about the project, about the community that you serve, that kind of thing. We also look for projects that are meeting accessibility and sustainability standards. Some other kind of behind the scenes things that can come into play for these major capital grants is, as I've mentioned, we have many donors who are part of the foundation, and so if your project aligns with the interests of a particular donor advisor, or if we have a particular field of interest fund that has been established, those are some of the things that we consider when reviewing these proposals. And I guess just sort of background knowledge that the foundation might have about what some emerging community issues or priorities are. For example, in the fall, we just released something called Vital Signs that was looking at what sort of citizen priorities are in terms of making our community a great place to be. So that's going to be informing our upcoming strategic plan, but could also highlight issues that our board wants to address in the more immediate term. So that's not a comprehensive list of all the things that we look for these major capital grants, but it's certainly some of the highlights of the things that we look for. Thought it would be helpful just to share some sample projects that we've done over the years, the last couple of years. Again, that's not a comprehensive list. But in 2016, we committed $500,000 to the Indigenous Peoples Gardens, which is part of the broader project at Assiniboine Park for the Diversity Gardens. We also provided $100,000 for an out-yard courtyard for the Lubov Foundation, which is for a personal care home. McDonald Youth Services, if you drive past their new location on Mayfair, the Winnipeg Foundation was part of supporting that new initiative. And then last year, we provided a $100,000 grant to the Jewish Community Campus for them to do some security upgrades to their front entrance. We were part of Siloam Mission's capital campaign, which they just formally announced a couple weeks ago. And then also last year, we supported $300,000 for the Ginikanikachak organization and the expansion of their facility. So you can see that there's a range of grant amounts. So in terms of percentages, for example, Assiniboine Park, that is a multi-million-dollar capital campaign that they're involved in, and so our contribution was $500,000. Same with Siloam Mission. I believe they have a $19 million capital campaign goal, and so our contribution was $150,000 versus Ginikanikachak. I believe that their project was in the range of $1 to $2 million, and the foundation made a $300,000 commitment. So it really does range depending on the project and all the factors that I've already described. It's helpful to know that the major capital grants tend to be more competitive than our one-time community grants. So for example, in 2016, we received 8 requests for major capital support, and of those we supported, and the total amount requested was just over $5 million. Of those, we supported just over half. 5 organizations received grants totaling $1.8 million. Last year was the first year that we introduced the 2-stage application process. So 18 organizations submitted a stage 1 application. Of those, 11 were invited to submit a stage 2 application, and our total requests were about $4 million. And then from there, 7 organizations received support from the foundation, totaling just over $1.6 million. So each year, the board allocates between $1.5 and $1.8 million for these major capital projects. In terms of this year, we don't know how many applications we're going to receive, but based on the interest that we've had on this information session, we're anticipating that it'll be more applications than we received last year. But we never know. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have that are more general. So the question was, do organizations receive the full amount they requested, or is partial funding considered? Again, it depends. It depends on the size of the request. For example, in the almost 100-year history of the Winnipeg Foundation, the largest grant we've ever done is $6 million, and that was for the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. So realistically, if you're looking for more than that, we wouldn't meet the full amount of your request. If your request is in the range of what you saw up on the screen of what we've supported for projects, it's more likely that you would get the full amount that you've requested. Yeah. Yep.
Can you split a capital request between, say, 2 projects?
So the question was, could you split a capital request between two projects? No. So these are really for large-scale capital, standalone capital projects. If you have two smaller capital projects, then we'd encourage you to select which one was the highest priority and then submit a one-time community grant request. Yeah, so the question is if your capital project is in multiple phases and you proceed with one phase before you've heard back from the Winnipeg Foundation, from our perspective, that's okay. Our grant dollars just couldn't go towards the phases that have been completed, but we could consider any future phases. And that's something that you would just want to note in your application. And also keep us up to date on. So there is quite a bit of time between even when your stage 2 application is due in mid-June and when our board of directors meets in November. So your grant application is not a static document. There's always opportunities to update us. In fact, we encourage you to update us if another funder comes on board or something changes, that as your application is working its way through our systems, that you can always update it. So yeah, but short answer is yes, if it's a phased project, you could ask the Winnipeg Foundation for phases not completed yet. So the question is, if a nonprofit organization does not have charitable status, could they submit a major capital grant request through a registered charity? So the answer to that is also, it depends. So the Winnipeg Foundation does not do what we call sponsored applications. So that is where a registered charity would purely just sponsor an application on behalf of a nonprofit, that it would truly need to be a joint project that was mutually beneficial both to the registered charity and to the nonprofit. And again, for grants at the level that we're talking about, we'd want to be sure that it was a very close partnership and again, mutually beneficial for both organizations. So the question was, how far along do you need to be with your drawings and your architecture's report and your engineer's report and that kind of thing before submitting the application? The more of that information that you have, the better, because that will allow you to provide a more accurate budget. But we don't have any specific requirements about whether it has to be, I don't know, I never know what order they go in, but you know how there's Class A drawings, Class B drawings, Class C drawings, that kind of thing. But again, the further along your project it is, I think the stronger that'll make your proposal. I should note too that the Winnipeg Foundation, through our one-time community grants, over the years we have supported organizations to do some of that preliminary or that preparatory work. So helping them with their capital campaign planning or their fundraising planning or some of the more technical requirements, the business plan, the architecture's drawing, that those would be all sort of preliminary costs that you could consider a one-time community grant application for if you're further away from being able to move forward with a major capital grant. The question was, it's very small boxes, very few words to be able to describe the benefit to community of your project. How could you go about finding out what would be most impactful for the Winnipeg Foundation? So certainly all of our recent grants are listed on our website, so you can have a sense of the types of projects that the foundation has supported in the past. I've mentioned our vital signs report, so that is something that, you know, certainly for our next strategic plan, we're looking to help identify our grant-making priorities, but there might be some nuggets in there that apply to your current project. The question is, what kind of pre-consultation is available in terms of submitting a project? Certainly our staff is happy to answer questions. It's really up to the organization and the board of directors to determine what is the appropriate project to put forward and what is the appropriate grant stream. We can give you information about all of them, but we can't necessarily tell you which project has the best chance of success. But yeah, no, we're always happy to answer questions.